because what's happening with pornography is that we're visually stimulated, and there's not the actual focus on what the body is feeling and how we're feeling. And this is the lack, so to say, for many men anyhow. And so it's just being fed more and more and more through the visual stimulation. Then when we're actually meeting with our partner, we can't really feel her or him, depending on the situation. We can't really feel ourselves. For certain times, once, twice a week or whatever, you leave it out and you just feel, you just concentrate on feeling. And I've had such beautiful feedback in terms of what people share in terms of, wow, why is my heart opening? Why am I feeling my heart when I'm, masturbating? So it's been, yeah.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to season 2 of the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast with your host, Harrison Ma. This podcast sets the loving intention of creating the mystical space needed to pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. Now let's walk you home to your cosmic spiritual heart space. Before I get the pleasure to introduce my lovely mystical guest today, a reminder for all of you wonderful souls that are tuning in, both familiar and new, ways that you can help us get this message out there into the frequencies and the cosmos is by sharing this out to a friend, a lover, a family member. You can also go over to Apple and Spotify, leave your feedback, your love, your comments on anything that you've gained from this beautiful chat we're going to have today. The lovely soul I have the pleasure of dancing with and interviewing and going deep into all these topics today is the lovely Kati. Kati is a psychologist and she is a powerful Tantra teacher. And that is really the theme of today's chat that we're going to get into today. All things Tantra healing, but specifically also through the wounded masculine. We're going to be talking about bringing in Tantra to support the masculine while also understanding both the feminine side of this, right? These two energies, the tools, the tips that we can use, and also bringing in the powerful inner child. With all of that, my lovely friend, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Harrison, thank you so much for this very beautiful introduction. Yes, I'm very happy to be here, very excited. I've been listening to your podcast and I'm super happy to be a guest now today.
It's, what's that feeling like, my friend? Like, I know when I listen to podcasts and I connect into that frequency, what's that? Is there a difference, or is it just like continuing, but now you get to sort of add in your spice to the chat?
Well, obviously it's very exciting, yeah. From just listening to then actually being someone that shares in the podcast. So it's a new element. It's very exciting, and it's also exciting that I get to contribute what I'm most passionate about.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear all about it. Well, I guess, my friend, where I would love to start with you before we get into all things Tantra and the themes of today, I want to know, and I'm sure people listening want to learn a little bit about you and your soul. And we're going to chat about this, but it doesn't really matter the modality and the specific tool set that we talk about. Of course, they're powerful. Of course, they're unique. But to me, it's really about the frequency of love that's channeled through it. And your unique soul and your unique frequency is obviously here for a reason. So, Kati, I'm wondering if you can explain. I like asking this question, like, what is your pain teacher? What is the event or the awakening experience that comes to mind when you think about what has led you to the work that you're doing here in this moment?
Yeah. I do have the feeling that this is going to be the hardest question of them all. Well, let me just give a little background and then come back to your question. It feels, my life has been quite turbulent in terms of the places I've lived, where I was actually formerly born in Germany, but spent the majority of my life in the US. And I'm now we're recording while I'm in Mexico. So there's a part of me that's been all over the world. And there's always been this longing and this knowing that there's something more, that there's something deeper to life than what, than just, doing the regular 9 to 5. And I tried that. I went to university, studied psychology, was in a very long-term, beautiful relationship, worked my butt off in consulting companies after I finished studying. And somehow it wasn't fulfilling. It was like
Wasn't
always...
enough.
It wasn't enough. No, it wasn't enough. And there was this search. Of course, I was, a little bit into yoga and meditation, but there was, so I actually had this moment, when I was 32, where I left it.
Interesting
I
age.
left it.
Interesting age, right? Well,
Yeah.
just to point that out, Kati, I'm sure you know this, but that's, 20, 28, 29, 30 and early 30s. It's that beautiful Saturn returns, right? It's that beautiful moment and this is why I asked the question. It's the moment, it's one of the moments that we get the opportunity to anchor that spirit, to anchor the spirit and what it actually wants. It sounds like you did that.
Yeah. So I took off. I put my butt on a one-way ticket to Mexico back then. I was actually intending to travel further down south. I put my life in boxes. There's still, the life in Germany is still in boxes. I left a long-term relationship of almost 10 years. And there I went. And one of my best friends shared with me, you always wanted to do a meditation and yoga retreat. Go to Mexico, go to Oaxaca, go to this spot, this meditation and retreat center, and go there. And so I did. And almost 5 years later, I'm still somehow around and I'm finding more answers, obviously not all the answers. And I'm still very much confronted with many things, but it's been a very beautiful teacher of just, like following the calling and following the longing of finding what I'm all about.
Have you found the specific, so it's interesting. So first of all, thank you for sharing the story, my friend. It's interesting how certain people, it sounds like your friend mentioned this and something lit up in you and then you took the leap. But then when you got to this location, did the land speak to you? Did the land, because obviously you've stayed obviously longer than what you originally planned. I'm wondering, because this is a sort of question that's coming through, did the land speak to you? Did the heart or the love of the mysticism of the land, did that pull to you to make you want to stay?
Yeah, for sure. And it's, for me, somehow there's a special connection with Mexico, and I don't know what's happening at the soul level, what's happening, maybe what has happened, who has been here, what version of me, but there's always been this pull to this side of the world, Spanish speaking country. And it's basically when I leave Mexico, there's tears. When I get into Germany or leave Germany, there are no tears, and of course, family and friends, and I miss everyone very dearly, but there is a special connection to this place, special energy about this place.
Have you, and this is just a seed, a plant, if you haven't looked into it, my friend, have you done any sort of past life regressions or hypnotherapy to look at your connections to the land? Has that had the opportunity to come into your world?
Past life regressions and hypnotherapy, yes, but actually never specifically with Mexico. So that's a good idea. Yeah, that would be very interesting.
Let me know what comes out. Get good energies there. Kati, let's get into this topic now. Thank you for that container of you that you've shared with us. And I think that really frames what we're going to speak about today, and the light that you're bringing to this chat, right? And this tool set and these modalities of healing. And so we're going to go into Tantra and a few things here. And I just want to point out, it's nice I've spoken about Tantra before in many ways, and I've had some teachers come on, but you're the first feminine energy. So it's going to be nice to go into this from the feminine perspective. So with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could maybe explain first here, what is Tantra to you? Why is it important? And why is it something we need to bring into our lives if we're looking to go a little bit deeper?
Well, first of all, I feel honored that I am the first woman speaking about Tantra here to you. So Tantra for me is really become a path, basically. Yeah. And I think, obviously we can speak about all the misconceptions about Tantra in a minute. But for me, Tantra has really become a path. If it's like a path, a spiritual path, so to say, where I have learned to embrace everything about life a lot through the senses of just being in life, going through life, smelling life, tasting life, everything that, we are all energy. And so how we are connecting with the world and with other beings is, from my perspective, Tantra is a very, very, very beautiful approach because, from the many spiritual traditions and the many spiritual paths that there are, Tantra is one where life is embraced, on the other hand, the more ascetic paths of, where the body is neglected. The recommendation is to go into a cave and meditate, leave out sexuality, leave out relationships. Tantra is definitely a path that's a little bit more in line with how most of us live today.
Kati, I want to just pull up that point there of supporting the physical. I think I know I experienced this in my journey. Once we start to awaken, I think it's very easy. The word that comes up, or the phrase that comes up, is spiritual bypassing, right? We don't just bypass the emotions in that process, but we often, many of us bypass the physical, right? And we forget that, yes, we are powerful spiritual beings, that in that cave we can connect to that divinity. But what happens when we come out of that cave? What happens when we leave our meditative mats? What happens when we leave our yogic practice or whatever we're connecting to? How are we supporting that physical body? And it sounds like your tantric practice or your worldview really aligns with that. Does that resonate with your journey, my friend? Did this support you within that awakening process?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first years here were more on the other side, more on the ascetic side, including spending time in the dark, spending time with, living off almost nothing, basically, going more strong in terms of the diets and being more restrictive in many ways, which was helpful. And I felt like maybe a catalyst at some point, but at some point I also realized, like this, exactly how you were saying it, as soon as I get off the mat, as soon as I come out of my retreat or a cave, there is life, and life around me moves. And there's so many insights that you can have, and so many things that we learn in retreats about ourselves. But how do we act when we come back out? Are we still the same person? How can we interact with our families, with friends? It's a much more harmonious approach in terms of, actually integrating what we learn into life. And and of course, from one side of a tantric perspective, the sexuality plays an important role in that, which we'll hope to also speak about.
Well, let's talk about that now, my friend, because I think that is, and I love the laughter coming out of you, because I know where this is coming from, and I know that, and we talked about this in the first episode I did on Tantra, but it'll be nice to hear your feminine perspective and view of this, because and I have sympathy, I have compassion for the souls looking to get into Tantra through this lens. And while I think, and I've spoken many times on this show about the need for healthy sexual expression, and the need for healthy sensuality, and the need to bring divinity back into sensuality, I think if that is the only container that you're holding Tantra in, you're probably missing a lot of the bigger picture. So maybe speak about this, my friend. Speak about this misconception and how it can sort of take us away, and what can we do to sort of move through it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's funny when you even mention the word Tantra, right? You go meet some new people. I recently went back to Germany, and people wanted to know what I'm doing. And I teach Tantra Yoga and and of course there's there's a lot of curiosity, which is very beautiful. There's a lot of interest and curiosity, but there's also skepticism. And of course, people, have associations with that Tantra is only about sexuality, that it's about, you go to a Tantra seminar and then there's wild orgies and whatnot, or, it's all about sexuality, all about genital massages and just,
Where do you think that comes from, Kati? Where do you think those stereotypes come from?
Well, I guess this is how Tantra is being taught in the West, yeah? So like even the people that I spoke with that have had connections to Tantra in Germany and Europe, that's a lot of the teaching. That's a lot of the teaching. The problem is, I guess, or the difficulty is that the traditional approach and the actual thousands-year-old traditions and teachings and, going into Taoism and like really going with the teachers that know and really learning from the teachers that know, and not saying that I have done all of that or learned all of that, but at least it's my aspiration to actually share what Tantra is really all about. And so I feel it's, I guess it's maybe introduced a little bit as a shortcut and like as a hype in the West, and it is exciting. I mean, there's no lie about it. Sexuality is just for all of us something that's very exciting. And for many, this can be a way into a more fulfilled sexual life, no doubt. But if that's, like you were mentioning, the only intention behind learning about Tantra and practicing Tantra, then that is extremely limited. And I think in the long run, this can actually be dangerous from my perspective. Yeah, you can lose yourself in the intensity of the energies that you can start creating.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's go back here for a second, because I want to just point this out for everyone. And this is the reason I said I have compassion for this misconception. I think so you touched on the light aspects, the excitement of the sexual act being the reason why maybe that's the stereotype that wins. But I also think it's the other side of the coin. I think there's so much wounded sexual beings out there, right? There's so much mostly unconscious, right? A lot of wounded, I just think of the religious population that have for generations, where we were just talking about your past lives, right? That generations of people with past lives have had sexual suppression within the religious community. So then when they see something like Tantra and they're like, oh, there's some sexual liberation here. I don't care about all the other aspects of Tantra. Let's put all my chips into the sexual piece so I can reclaim my divinity again. I can reclaim my sexual power. And I think that's beautiful, but just like we can become unbalanced by too much of the suppression, we can become unbalanced by too much of the one thing. Does that resonate, my friend?
Yes, resonates completely. Thank you for adding that, actually. Yeah, that, and this is actually also very interesting, being a woman in this field, and also seeing very honestly who reaches out. Yeah. And it is obviously mostly men that reach out to me through social media, where I do feel there's a longing. Yeah. There's a longing, because deep down inside for all of us, it's the same, the longing for connection, the longing for love, for self-love, being able to be with someone. Yeah. And for many people, this is not accessible. And like you were just mentioning, Tantra can then be the way to come into that. So let's
talk about this, Kati, because this is the piece that when we were talking before this podcast, this was the piece that I'm like, oh, there's something here. It's the wounded masculine within the tantric soothing that I really want to hone in on. And so let's start with actually what you just described, with being a female in this tantric practice and men reaching out to you. How do you move through that? So maybe explain, if you're comfortable, what that looks like when the men reach out to you, and then how do you? I get an image in my head, like you taking the energy of that and then sort of alchemizing it into something else. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's very diverse. And I've had female women also reaching out to me, so not to say not. But yeah, mainly it is men. And then it's coming it's coming from a place often of graspiness. Yeah, it's coming from a place, and I can feel the energy of how I'm being approached. That it's coming from a longing and a deep sense of neediness almost. Yeah, and it's very different depending on the person, obviously, but it's of course sometimes crossing boundaries, yeah, for my boundaries. And so this is actually the biggest learning that I've had, is that a lot of the people that approach me may have never learned that someone is expressing boundaries to them. And the way they're approaching me is probably also the way they have approached women in the past, making them very likely to have not had so much success, And so I actually work with that. I start working with that right away and reflecting that back. And I make my boundaries clear in terms of, what is okay to say to someone if you don't know someone online, and what is not okay. And then it's been very interesting, because there's actually been a response, and not from everyone, of course, but case to case, I feel like there's sometimes an awareness that comes that wasn't there before, because it's, this is all, it's all learned behavior, who do we have around us? Where do we see how to approach someone, how to approach a woman? And where should we learn this? If we don't have the practice. And so I feel like there's definitely some openness of men then just even apologizing, like, okay, I wasn't aware of this, I'm interested, I'm curious. And then I explain more, and then for me, especially working with men, I work with couples and mainly with men. But also I love working with couples because it just brings in a very beautiful dynamic, and it's like applied Tantra right away. It's a lot about me reflecting back the impact that certain things they say do, the energy that comes across, how it feels for me. So that's the main part of the work. Yeah.
You're the loving mirror. You're the loving divine mirror of the reflections that need to be seen internally. I think it's beautiful, my friend, that you have this psychological background and the Tantra connection, right? Because, and it's interesting, and you were explaining it beautifully, all of those projections and that neediness and that longing that you were talking about, it's all an internal space of something that was not met, right? And we'll talk about this later with the inner child. But a question that comes up here now that I want to get your perspective on, because I can relate that neediness, that longing, that desire in this context of the sort of sexual tantric view from a masculine perspective. For me, that came from a lot of not feeling safe, not feeling grounded in my being, not feeling, looking for that thing outside of me to give me the thing that I don't have internally. So I'm wondering, my friend, one, what's your perspective on this, and what do you think, how do you help the masculine feel safe through this tantric lens?
Yeah. That's, Harrison, that's a beautiful point that you're speaking of, because I feel like that is also somehow my biggest mission in life. Yeah, it's I grew up definitely around male father figure where I didn't have the feeling of feeling safe. Yeah. And I felt like I was seeing every day in and out the wounded masculine very, very strongly and very intensely. And I feel like over the years, this I feel has become my purpose, actually, to provide that. And I never totally understood. But looking back, all my long-term relationships, the number one feedback I always got from my partners was, wow, I can tell you anything, I'm not being judged. I can just, really honestly say what's going on inside of me, desires and fears and, things that we think we can't share with anyone. And this is, so somehow I learned to, in my private life, create a platform for men for this, and realizing now over the years that this has actually become a gift, that this is also something that I want to support men with. And I think the women play such an important role in this, yeah, and can be so supportive, but at the same time can be extremely they can be the main reason for the difficulties that there are. Yeah. Like even traumatic almost. Yeah. And then like really having the awareness that the things that you say to your partner, especially if it's related to lovemaking, masculinity. Yeah. I mean, and it's so important to really be aware of the words that and the power that we women also have on both sides. And so this is something I feel women, and this is also a part where I do like to work with women, and I do like to work with couples, because this is where they can really support their man in, you know, stepping up and feeling more confident, because it's
I love it. I can feel your heart opening, my friend. This is beautiful. This wounded masculine. I want to be very clear here, just in case people are getting confused. When I say wounded masculine, I don't mean the physical masculine. I mean the energetic masculine, right? Kati's beautifully explaining this, but I say that, I make that distinction because, my friend, when you say that, you have this beautiful gift, right? And you're able to hold the space for the physical male to feel safe for their feminine to come up. Right? What is that thing in you that's holding that space? It's your masculine. So it's this beautiful reflection between the reason that male, the physical male, feels safe in your energy is because you're allowing your masculine that's coming up that might need to be addressed and healed and loved. And then in that reflection, it's allowing the physical male with their masculine and their feminine to then dance, right? And to express, which is, I want to get your thoughts on something here that's bubbling up. This is where I think, you know, you hear in society that the patriarchy is a negative, horrible thing, and it is in many ways. But I think where people get lost is that they attach patriarchy as just a physical male attacking the physical female, when in reality it's impacting the energetics. It's impacting the energetic masculine that is in both the male body and the female body. So how we heal it as a collective is by equally embracing the feminine and the masculine in both the male and the female. And so, one, I want to see if you resonate with this, my friend. And two, I feel that Tantra and everything you're explaining is a way that we can have this balance, right, in a partnership, whether it's sexual or otherwise. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yes, I totally resonate. Yeah, and you're actually speaking of a main idea of Tantra, and you are also mentioning it as we're speaking, that we are dancing, you know, in this conversation, we are dancing. And this is actually the same perspective Tantra has on relationships in terms of, yes, we are, all of us have a primal sexual essence, like a sexual energy. And for most women, this energy is female. For most men, this energy is masculine. But it's not always like that. You know, nowadays it's all a little bit more fluid, which is beautiful. But ultimately, we all have both energies inside of us. And as you were mentioning, that when I'm allowing and when I'm supporting men to share and share from the wounded, and I'm holding space, I'm more in my masculine strength in that moment. And it's about the dance. Yeah, it's about the dance that we both, or that every single one of us has masculine and feminine energies inside of them, and that these and both sides need to be coming together and dancing individually, but then also as a couple. And so in Tantra, this is actually a main idea. And this is, I'm not sure if you're aware also of the idea of polarity in Tantra and love relationships. And that's actually a big part why, according to Tantra, why couples struggle after, you know, being together 5 or 10 years, why sexual energy gets lost, why things get dry, so to say, because the energies become more and more similar. And the concept of polarity actually like really speaks to physically separate a couple in regular time periods to refocus the energies, and calibrate, and for men to have their men's group, for women to have their women's group, and to really, you know, being able to go into our primary energy with, the people that have a similar energy. But of course, it's always about the balance and being able to also have a cultivated female energy or feminine energy. Yeah.
On that note, my friend, how do we, let's, because you were hitting on pieces there, let's get practical for people listening. And let's say that you're either a man that's listening and you've recognized this wounded masculine, or you're a beautiful female that maybe has some of that wounded masculine, or you're noticing it in your male partner. What are some practical tools here that we can start to bring this beautiful dance more into balance? Outside of, you just gave some with the men's groups, the women's groups, but what else can we start to do, maybe from a Tantra lens, practical tool lens, that can help us come back into this dance?
Yeah. Well, I think from a tantric perspective, but also a psychological perspective, it's the awareness. Yeah. The awareness and putting that focus also on these energies and allowing things to be the way they are. Yeah. And the recognition of how things are. I think that's a main piece. And then,
there's a huge.
Yeah. And then from a tantric perspective, and really looking at the sexual energy, really, because Tantra does parts of Tantra consciously works with the sexual energy, because it is our strongest energy. Yeah, it's the energy that ultimately creates life. And once you get that energy moving, there's so much magic that can happen in many ways, and also so much healing that can happen. So from a tantric perspective, I've definitely had the experience of the wounded masculine being healed through intense lovemaking. Yeah. Intense, open lovemaking, and the connection that can happen. And when a woman can hold space for a man, for the wounded masculine to come out, then it's, there's so much magic that can happen. And it's like, I think also I know I'm going off on a couple tangents.
No, you're not. You're not, my friend. Let me ask a question with that, because I can. There's a part of me that's curious, and I'm sure if I'm curious, the audience is curious too. In the lovemaking, how is that healing achieved? Right, because I think back to my sexual experiences, and I know that one of the ways that my masculine did feel, whether it was inferior or weak or broken or wrong, is because it was needing to meet certain expectations, or it felt that if it did something a certain way, then it would be judged, or it needed to control the container. And if it didn't go exactly how it was I expected or wanted it to be within that container, then I was wrong, or I didn't achieve the thing. So I'm wondering, what does that look like? How does that lovemaking soothe? In what ways can the masculine open up within a lovemaking session?
Yeah, beautiful. Well, there's obviously different pillars of Tantra, different pillars of conscious sexuality, but one of the main things that I love sharing about is that Tantra has no goal. Tantric, making love from a tantric perspective, has no goal, has no intention. And so this is absolutely new for a lot of people, because, obviously you make love to either, for the 95% of the people, you make love to have an orgasm and to, because this is what you do and this is what you learn, and then boom, finished, out, over. But for Tantra, it's there are no goals, there's no expectations, there's no right or wrong. And so you meet each other in every moment. Yeah. And this can look like that you start making wild love, and then somehow get sidetracked and something becomes very funny and you have a laugh flash together, and then maybe boom, the sexual energy goes away. Maybe it comes back. It's a fluid process of just being together. it can look like that, you're making wild, passionate love, and then the female partner or even the male partner becomes very emotional because so much energy is moved, something comes up, and then there needs to be space for that. So basically, it works with what is in the moment, and there's space for everything, and everything is okay. And a big part of Tantra is obviously moving away from the goal orientation and moving away from the orgasm. And so there's obviously a lot of wisdom behind that, and a lot of yogic practitioners, long-term tantric practitioners who really consciously try. It's more about the movement of the energies within the body, and not so the movement of the energies outside of the body. Yeah, because it's really living from the idea of energy can be built and built and built and built, but as soon as it's spilt, which would mean very practically for men through the ejaculation, and very practically for women also in explosive orgasms, or through their menstruation, then the energy is no longer there, and it needs to be recreated. So
I love it. So the question that comes up here now, and I do want to refer people back to episodes I've done. I'll put these in the show notes with Andre Knight and Heather Tucker. We talked a lot about Tantra and specific the circulation of the energy that Kati is beautifully highlighting here. I'm wondering, my friend, I want to get your perspective on this within that circulation of the sexual energy within the act, and helping the masculine find balance and find that fluid nature that you were talking about. What is the role of the breath in your perspective? What is the role of using the breath to either cultivate this fluid state, or to help us move through and surrender through the control and the expectations?
Yeah, the breath is key. For sure, the breath is key. And this is, I guess, for many of us, it's not only during sexuality, but everyday life. We're not actually breathing the way we should, and we're holding our breaths, for women as well as for men. And I mean, it's a combination of breath. It's a combination of actually bringing the awareness to a different part of the body. So like for most men, the difficulty with I would say, for most men, all the energy is in the lower parts of the body. So obviously around the genitals. And this is what ultimately leads to ejaculation for many men, also way sooner than they actually would want. And so, as I was mentioning, with the circulation of the energies, through breathing and through concentrating on a different part of your body. And what I really like to work with is actually the heart. And the woman can actually support a man very beautifully in this by touching her partner in these specific other areas. For example, putting the hand on the heart, and then deeply inhaling, and then actually concentrating on the heart while the woman is touching the heart. And then that does enable and support the energy to move. Doesn't always work right away. And that's, again, there's no right or wrong, and there's no, this needs to be this way. And if it doesn't work the first, second, third, fourth, fifth time, then that's bad. It's not, it's like, it's trial and error, and you just see. And I guess it's breath, but for a lot of people also just going slower and away from the wildness that we have learned through pornography and whatnot, but actually just going slower. Yeah.
That's
key word, no?
Yeah, that is. It's super key. So this is, I'm so happy you brought this up. So this is another piece of the wounded masculine right here. This is, and I'll just speak for myself, and I'm sure I relate to either men listening, and I've actually seen this in women too, the masculine within the female body, right? The comparison or the stereotype of and I'm not here to demonize pornography, but what I am here to pull out is, in most pornography, it is only in that hyper masculine state, right? The go, get it done, like you described before, finish, ejaculate, we're all done, right? And I think that is part of our collective unconscious, in our collective sexual unconscious. It's that idea that is the container that we need to keep sex in. If it's anything outside of that container, then it mustn't be lovemaking. It mustn't be getting the result. I'm using my fingers here to help us move through this. So I'm wondering this, I hadn't planned to ask you this question, but it's coming up, my friend. How do you soothe and help people through the healing of this?
Yeah. Well, I think it's beautiful. I think that's beautiful that we're talking about it, because I think a lot of people don't. And so this is definitely, with all my partners and with all my clients, I address these topics. I ask these topics, and it's like, what is your relationship with your own sexuality, and like, what does it look like when you pleasure yourself? Do you watch pornography? And so it's actually inviting someone to go there, to reflect that. And I wouldn't want to demonize it either, but almost. I've actually gotten a lot into the science behind it, also what it does to our brain, and that it works like any other addiction, like alcohol, and drugs. And so it's a deeply rooted pattern that is oftentimes very difficult also for relationships. And this is, as you were mentioning, this is something that women and men, or men and women are confronted with. And so, you see more and more promotion also in social media, right? About no porn for so and so many days. And it's definitely possible. And if I may speak even. Yeah.
No, kick out. I have a recommendation just to flow in here for people that, because you did point out pornography addiction, and I think it's so important to classify it as this for multiple reasons, but also for the reason of coming out of it. Because I know I went through this, and I'm sure you've seen clients that have also, like any addiction, we don't want to go from 100 to 0, right? Going cold turkey, right? I'm sure cold turkey works for a small percentage of people, but for the majority, it's very difficult. So I want to get your thoughts on this, my friend. This is something that I've used, and something that I've advised people that I've worked with use, is many of the pornography sites or pornography outlets that you go to now, they're actually incorporating a lot of the tantric ideologies. And I'm sure they're not of the purest heights, but they are a middle ground. They are a middle ground for which I know this has helped me to go from that extreme masculinization to a little bit of the tantric worldview, to then fully coming off it. So what are your thoughts on that, my friend? Do you think that's a strategy that can work?
Yeah, that's beautiful, because I think what this also cuts into is, and thank you also for sharing personally your journey, is the idea of desensitization, right? And like, we're going now from obviously using a lot of pornography to get it to less, but it also works both ways. Yeah. So the difficulty with pornography is that over time, what you see and what you need in order to have the same amount of arousal just needs to get more extreme. It needs to get more intense. Yeah? And that's what's one of the key aspects. Same with any substances, that you consume, and you just need a little bit more, you need a little bit more, you need a little bit more. And so what you were just describing is coming from the other way, being at the point of, fully using pornography, maybe also things that are very much in the masculine, as you were speaking about it, and then coming off it slowly and integrating softer elements. I like that approach. I definitely like that approach. And I also, what's really important for the work with my clients, that I don't, it's such a normal part of society. So there's also no, what's the word? No judging. Yeah. Like I really tell clients that this is the case for 98% of the population, 95% of the population. And this is just now a modern idea that we're starting to realize, oh, wait, maybe this is not the right approach, right? And what has really, and I've led a couple of partners through this process as well, which is of course also very beautiful to see the transition, the invitation for someone, to just, because what's happening with pornography is that we're visually stimulated and there's not the actual focus on what the body is feeling and how we're feeling. And this is the lack, so to say, for many men anyhow. And so it's just being fed more and more and more through the visual stimulation. Then when we're actually meeting with our partner, we can't really feel her or him, depending on the situation. We can't really feel ourselves. And and so what I really like to do is I invite clients, to do a little practice and, just, without judging what's happening with the pornography, but also trying something new, like just for certain times, once, twice a week or whatever, you leave it out and you just feel, you just concentrate on feeling. And I've had such beautiful feedback in terms of what people share in terms of, wow, why is my heart opening? Why am I feeling my heart when I'm, masturbating?
Yeah.
So it's actually, it's been, yeah.
What you're describing, Kati, is the feminine turning back on, right? It's the if we're going to describe it very simply, and this is what I've experienced. It's that feeling body is mostly attached to the feminine within you, within the male, right? So it's. I hope people are noticing this theme throughout the chat today. Is that a big part of the wounded masculine healing is inviting the feminine back in, either in an external female or in your own feminine, through the feeling body, through the sensitivities, through the being and the opening, right?
Yeah.
Which brings me now to another topic I want to ask you about in regards to all things Tantra, and not just the sexual elements, but I think we'll keep going with it because it really it's bringing us a lot of examples here. I want to ask you, because you have this beautiful balance between the psychological background and the Tantra worldview, the inner child. And I'm gonna just throw this in here and then get your perspective on this. I teach about the core needs of the inner child. And I'll put these in the show notes for people to go back and listen to the episodes I've done on the inner child. And I think we can all understand the core needs of being able to speak our truth, or to feel safe, or unconditional love, or being nurtured, being touched even. These are all inner core child needs. But I think the one that we often overlook, and this is what I want to get your perspective on and see how this connects to Tantra, is healthy sexual expression, right? Where does our sexual identity and our sexual understanding of the sexual being that we are, where does it start? It doesn't start in adulthood, right? It starts earlier, right? It starts, at the end of that childhood going into adolescence. So with all of that said, my friend, I'm wondering, where do you feel in the work that you do through Tantra, where does inner child healing come into it all?
Yeah, that's a really, really also very important aspect. And maybe to touch on the first question in terms of where does the sexual development really start to happen, and I would say it's even much before then. Even as we start to be little toddlers, back in the when toddlers are actually maybe 3, 4, 5, something like that. When you start playing Barbies with your male neighbor or the little boy next door, and then the Barbies start making love, and Barbie and Ken or whatnot. I think we all know that example. This is already where it starts. This is where these ideas start. This is where that energy starts to express itself. And when we are young, it's just naturally expressing itself, and you see even kids, they're just walking around and they're just, touching their genitals. And then of course it's a tricky part for the parent to deal with it. And I think this is where a lot of the the wounding and the suppression already happens, because it's something that's bad. It's something that shouldn't happen. It shouldn't do, and and even, I don't know what your sexual education looked like, but you don't, like most families don't really talk about these topics and how natural sexual energy is, how naturally it is there anytime, especially sexual energy attraction anytime when you're a woman and you're meeting with a man, and this is also the energy that you resonate with. It's always there, and I feel, unfortunately nowadays it's somehow all a little bit distorted. And I think actually the healing can happen much, much earlier. Yeah, the healing can happen much, much earlier. And I would hope that this is happening as more people are learning about Tantra that are our age now, for example, my age. There's more of an education for the children as they start to express for the first time their sexual energy, which happens extremely early. And that is, that it is okay, that it needs its space, of course, and it's not in every setting, but that it's definitely a very natural, normal expression. Yeah. And I think that's. Mm-hmm.
And I just to add this, my friend, because I want people to really go, I would say go even further with this. So not just, I agree with everything you're saying in terms of the natural, the attraction between partners. But I would encourage people to take this even deeper, right? What is sexual attraction and our sexual energy connected to? It's connected to our creation energy. And if it's connected to our creation energy, where is that coming from? And this is, I want to get your perspective on this, my friend, and maybe we can connect it to the inner child. Our creation energy is from our source, is from our higher power, right? And whatever you want to call that higher power, God, source, divinity, the quantum field, whatever you feel comfortable referring it to as, it is an expression of that. So this is what I want to get your thoughts on. The extent in which we suppress that sexual sensual energy is also the extent in which we suppress that power that's inside of us. What are your thoughts on this, my friend?
Yes, I would totally agree. I haven't looked at it from that perspective, but in Tantra, and you were speaking about the creative energy that at the level of the genitals, right? Like especially when you're starting to speak about chakras, and the level of the sexual energy is at the level of the second chakra, Svatisthana chakra, right? And so this is all about creation. And when you actually, there's a way to express the sexual energy, but there's also ways to cultivate the sexual energy by not going into it for some time. And then you can actually see what happens with the creative power, with the life force power. Yeah. Like it's, yeah.
Well, I'll give an example of that. So you spoke about this before, and we'll keep it within the masculine body, right? You spoke before about the ejaculation being the releasing of that energy. But most men, myself included, for a long time, and it connects to the education, we're not taught that in the male body, you can separate those two things. You can separate the ejaculate, i.e. the losing of the creation energy, versus the orgasm, where we can cultivate that energy, going back to the breath, taking that orgasm that's just in the sacral, like you were saying, and then expanding that creation energy to the rest of our being. What is one of those areas? The heart. So do you agree with that, my friend?
Yes. Yes, sure. I'm actually surprised we haven't spoken about this, but yeah, that is for the healing of the masculine. One of the main aspects is to start learning that for men. Yeah. That first of all, the understanding and the knowing that there is such a thing, that ejaculation is not equal to orgasm, that these can be two different things, and the power that can be created. And I mean, I can share this also. I was with a partner who was very, very big. There's strict tantric practices for those that are really trying to, like he was actually a Buddhist monk for some time. So completely leaving out the sexual energy for some time. but then eventually decided to, re-engage. But still, some practitioners, some tantric practitioners, they actually decide to not ejaculate at all anymore for a certain amount of time, or very, very, very little. And this is probably something for everyone that's listening that may create a little bit of confusion, because it is in our modern society what is ultimately the goal, right? During sexual intercourse for most men. And so this is actually a really, really interesting concept. And I can share from a female perspective, making love with a person who had so much retained energy, it circulated through his system. Like that for me was a healing experience. This is where the feminine comes in, where the masculine can really start to also gift the feminine a beautiful, healing experience,
because it's creation energy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, so this is funny that you brought this up, because this is one of the questions that I was in the back of my mind. I was like, oh, should this be expressed today? I was like, apparently it needs to be expressed today. So I've shared this before on the podcast, but this is actually a practice that I do, right? Semen retention, or cultivating the energy. I'm wondering your thoughts on this, my friend. Because I think there is a difference between not connecting to your sexual energy versus doing semen retention and also allowing that energy to flow, right? So I think there's a difference between, let's use your example, a monk that's not ejaculating but also not consciously awakening their sexual energy, versus a monk that is doing the semen retention and engaging either with themselves in self-pleasure and still not ejaculating but cultivating the sexual energy, or with a partner. Is there a distinction there in terms of just health and vitality and allowing that creation energy to flow?
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak from personal experience, but I did speak to him about that. And from what I learned, that the retention in terms of really trying to take that energy out of the life, don't go into it mentally, physically, that's something that's not only very, very, very difficult, but it also didn't feel aligned for him for a longer sustained time period. And from the research that I had done from a biological, physical perspective, it's also, I feel like it's not totally meant to be like that. Yeah. and I feel like that the conscious working with the energy, cultivating the energy, like you were mentioning, circulating the energy, moving the energy through breath. And then when it does, when there is ejaculation once in a while, also not, going into judging, but rather just seeing it as it is. And therefore, bit by bit, cultivating that energy. I feel that's the healthiest approach. And there are also, from a more technical perspective, there are definitely teachers who would recommend, for those that are more hardcore on the practices of semen retention, that there is, I think it's every 30 days or every 2 months, something like that. There is a recommendation to actually also ejaculate to keep, everything healthy and flowing.
Since this is the last question I'll throw you, my friend, because I think this is really valuable. I know it's valuable for me, and I think these are the sort of questions that people come in with that can really stimulate a lot of things. What's the converse of this for the female ejaculate? Because it's different, right? It's it's for the female within the tantric view, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's actually it's the other side of the coin. It's actually stimulating the ejaculation can actually have the vitality versus the being more mindful of how consciously we're doing it. What's the female side of this coin?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the whole tantric perspective and about why even practice semen retention, it's about retaining the energy, cultivating the energy, increasing the amount of energy that's available for spiritual practice. It is coming back to that it is all about the spiritual practice. And for women, it's also, there's also definitely ways to lose energy, so to say, not as much and not as quickly as for the men, but it's definitely the main loss of energy for the woman is actually through her monthly menstruation. Yeah. So like there's actually practices for women. And there's also very much the recommendation to the first couple of days of the menstruation to actually not do anything, even just lay down or spend as much time upside down as you possibly can to reduce the blood flow. And yeah, so this is actually very interesting. I know a lot of practitioners that have over time really worked on this, and this is the case for me as well. Now it's not so much of a focus for me, but where people have actually almost basically made their menstruation go away, yeah, through so much yogic practice in terms of that. And then of course it's not just the menstruation, but it's also the what is called the explosive orgasm, yeah, during lovemaking. And there's differences for men and women. And the explosive orgasm for men is obviously the ejaculation, and the explosive orgasm for women is the one that we most know, the one that we usually see in pornography. It's just when it's like you can feel that the energy is expelled outward. There's less energy available afterwards. There's a sensitivity, and there's just okay, I'm done, versus the implosive orgasm that actually like really provides more energy and provides more connection. So that's the female coin. I think that was your question, right?
Yeah, it was. It's beautiful. I could talk,
okay.
My friend, I could talk about this all day, and we can't, but I honor you, my friend. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing in the world, and it's so needed. I know it's needed for me, and if it's needed for me, I'm sure it's needed for people listening. Just before we wrap up here, I just want to point out that element of the bleed, and it, for most women, the female is not seeing the moon cycle as a vital sign. There's so much disconnection, not just sexually from that area, but just disconnection in general. And I've worked with a lot of females that they have to rebuild their connection to not just the vagina area in general, but also seeing that the moon cycle and the menstruation is an indicator of their health, right? And a lot of females out there that, whether it be through the food they eat, whether it be through the toxins they're exposed to, whether it be through their internal state of disease, that moon cycle, that menstruation cycle is going to fluctuate, right? So I know for a lot of people, females listening, and maybe you can speak to this, my friend, there is irregular bleeding, right? There's either excessive bleeding, or it's just, from month to month, there's no consistency. So to me, it shows the importance of really seeing that bleed as a indicator of what needs to be addressed. Would you agree with that?
Yes, completely. This is definitely a topic I'm also very passionate about, and that wasn't part of my education, and it wasn't part of anything that I really learned and went into. But now it's really living with the cycle of the menstrual cycle, but then also combining and connecting that to the moon phases is something that I'm very passionate about, and just also seeing where you're at and when you are bleeding. And there is, I mean, for most women, having their menstruation is something that is seen as extremely negative, and it's something, where you're out of order, so to say. Yeah. And then there's not really the recognition from society, in terms of honoring that. And like what I really would love to invite women, and what I've started to invite myself more into, is really honoring that cycle, honoring those first few days. And it's not normal in terms of having excessive pains, excessive bleeding, and as you were mentioning, those are definitely signs and indicators of health. And with more awareness of the cycle nowadays, there's all these apps that you can use to actually track the symptoms. And when you have, premenstrual syndrome, when you have certain physical symptoms, and it's really, I would really invite all women to just really start looking at their cycle as something that's magical, that's special. Some women don't have their cycle and they wish they could have it, and it's something so beautiful, and and it used to be sacred, right? Like the women would, in the indigenous cultures, would go and because they usually all bled at the same time, they would go and bleed in the tent. And it's a phase of, actually, this is the phase of the month where women are most connected with their intuition. So it's such a special phase. So yes, I very much agree in terms of putting also the light there, shining the light there, and really encouraging women to educate themselves about that. And there's a lot out there today. So yeah.
My friend, I say this to you and to anyone listening, my lovely sister, she does a lot of artwork. She did artwork with her moon time, with her menstrual cycle. So not only just adding that sacred expression that you were talking about and the release and the connection, but also cultivating it and making it into creation energy, right? And doing artwork. So for people listening, I'll put it in the show notes. I did an episode with my lovely sister where we talked about this. We talked about not just using the moon time and the womb to help us heal, but how the act of the cycle can actually be creation energy too, right? And how we can add more love into the world with it all, right?
Yeah.
Kati, I've really enjoyed this today. I expected it, but our dance was even more magical than even my expectations led me to believe. I would love to give you the opportunity now for anyone that's really been pulled to your work, your heart, your divine healing feminine here today. What would you like to share for the listeners to reach out to you, whether it's your Instagram, your work, what comes up on your heart?
Yeah. Thank you so much for also providing that space. Yeah, of course. If anyone is interested, they're more than happy to reach out. I mostly work online now, as I mentioned, with couples or men. What's the best way to actually share my website right now, or can we put that in the show notes?
I'll put it all in the show notes. So the website is the best way to access you?
Yes, website, and there people can actually book a free discovery call, and we can see if working together is right, see what the pain points are, if I'm the right person, if we're right together. My Instagram channel is becoming more and more live. Just kicked this off about 4 months ago. Blooming of hearts, actually, with the dots in between. Yeah, and sharing in person is happening. This is a little bit away still, but I'm going to do a series of Tantra retreats actually in Germany in March of next year. They're going to be in a very beautiful location. One is already planned with a dear friend, Tantra teacher of mine, a male teacher, because we really want to bring in that dance that I found also amazingly beautiful today with you. And so, yeah, that's happening in March next year. That'll all be on my website. And for anyone that's interested, right now these workshops are planned in German, and I will probably start offering things in person here in Mexico at some point. So yeah, inviting anyone to reach out.
For anyone interested, again, it'll all be in the show notes. So of your podcast player, click the details and you'll see all the links there to go straight to this beautiful soul's expressions. My friend, last question here before we wrap this up. This is the Cosmic Love Antenna, and we have been dancing around this cosmic topic for this whole chat. And I'm wondering, my friend, how do you define that love word personally?
Yeah. I would say love. Love just is. Love just is, without too many additions and any specific requirements or specific ways of being. Love just is.
Nothing more, nothing less. My beautiful friend, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for sharing your love from your heart to mine. All the beautiful listeners out there, thank you for giving us your time, your energy, your attention. I hope this has lifted you up and awakened you to new insights and new understandings. If it has, please share it far and wide, but know that we love you unconditionally. And until next time here on the show, we send you light, we send you love, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye, everyone. Before I leave you today, beautiful beings, I'm so excited to share a special announcement just with you. On the 20th to the 23rd of April, 2023, I and a fellow guest of the show, the beautiful Ali Paws, will be hosting live in Tulum, Mexico, the Cosmic Heart Tour. If you listen to this podcast week to week and you resonate with my frequency, with my voice, with my love in any of the topics I share with you, then most likely it is time for us to connect and heal in person. So I invite you to join us in Mexico. Join us for some meditations, activations, yoga, craniosacral therapy, a book release, a live Q&A, poetry, and so much more. These spots are going to fill up super quick because our intention is to make this exclusive and intimate. So please DM me Cosmic Heart Tour on any of my social channels. That's Cosmic Heart Tour on any of my social channels, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and we'll book in a meeting so you can join the love. I'm so excited to connect with you in the flesh. Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Meagher, spelled Meagher. Sending you so much love.